In the massive space, and in different universes, out of all of those, there is a planet that houses one of the worst creatures to this day. There's some killers that literally just scare you. They give you the fear of walking out of your own door, that there really could be a monster that looks like a human, that would go after men, women, and children. The tale of the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, are more than just murders. They are vile, disgusting, and inhumane. They will make you think that Richard is not even human, that he's something from another planet, that he's literally the troll underneath the bridge, looking and hunting. This is the story of Richard, before he was known as Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker of California.
Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough, but then again, maybe they don't.
When we catch up with Richard, it's February 29th, 1960. Richard, whose first name will really be Ricardo, has just been born. He was born in El Paso, Texas. He was one of 5 children growing up in the home with a mother and father who were both immigrants. There's still much mystery surrounding Richard's life growing up, from false to what's real, to believing even what Richard would say about his past. We know that Richard's father used to abuse Richard on a weekly basis, and this would start at a very young age for Richard. Richard, being a young child that is being abused, is building up many things inside of him: fear, anger, and most importantly, violence. When Richard was a young child, he suffered 2 injuries to his head. Once, when he was around 2 years old, he tried to climb a dresser, trying to get to the top, that had a radio that sat on top of it. As he was trying to climb the dresser, it fell on top of him, causing an injury to his forehead that would leave him needing 30 stitches. The second injury Richard would have would be right when he was around 5 years old. He would be on a playground, and when walking by a swing, he would be struck in the head with it. It's said that following these injuries, Richard would experience epileptic seizures from time to time. But going back to the first time Richard got hurt, this is a very weird situation, something that would come up in his future. Years later, Richard would steal a very nice boombox radio from one of his victims' homes that would be used against him in court. With these 2 injuries happening in Richard's life, and still taking abuse from his father at the very same time, it's safe to say that Richard may have developed brain damage that would morph into something as an older man. When talking about brain damage, there are 3 parts with the brain that deal with emotion: having it or not having it. It's easy to speculate that one of these may have been damaged and would be a direct link into Richard's future. This may have been the fuel that would help Richard being able to drive so deep into the pits of unbelievable violence. Now, with Richard being a young man, he would find himself having a close friend around for a lot of his young childhood. It's no secret that Richard would spend a large amount of time with his older cousin, Mike Ramirez. It's safe to say, looking back, Richard's cousin was not the best influence on the young, impressionable Richard. Mike was a war vet that served in Vietnam. Mike was hard around the edges and was already, in so many rights, a serial killer that had not been found himself. Mike would spend hours telling young Richard about the times he had in war. Now, at this time, Richard is only about 10 to 12 years old. Obviously, this was before the internet or having a cell phone in your pocket. So the stories to a young man that already has secret thoughts tucked away for no one to know about in his head. Richard would smoke pot and drink with his uncle and listen to him tell of war, but he would also tell Richard other secrets. Mike would tell Richard that he murdered women while in Vietnam. He would tell him graphic stories of the women that he murdered and assaulted while there. He would also show Richard Polaroid pictures of the women before death and after death, and even standing by their bodies while they were decapitated. You have an older man telling a young man around 12 years old that looks up to the older man about these acts of extreme violence. As these stories would enter Richard's brain, they would not disgust him or scare him. They would just be building on the desires of his hidden thoughts, impulses that will be acted on later in the future. Richard would even say years later from his own mouth that while hearing the stories, seeing the pictures, they did not upset him or frighten him, but they intrigued him and were the most fascinating thing in his life at the time. Richard's Uncle Mike would even murder his own wife in front of Richard in 1973. He would walk into a kitchen where his wife stood, Richard nearby. Mike would find his wife in the kitchen, shoot her in the face, and she would pass right there on the spot. This in no doubt would seal the deal of leaving a mark on Richard. Now seeing a murder in action right in front of him, this would be the match to the wick that would burn into something evil. But upon the murder of Mike's wife, he will be arrested, taken to trial, and not found guilty. He will plead insanity and be released 4 years after his incarceration at the Texas State Mental Hospital in 1977. When he is released, he will find Richard older and hungrier for dark things in life. He will continue to influence him and mold him into something worse. Around this time, Richard is in his late teens. He would begin sneaking away from home, sleeping in cemeteries to escape his father's wrath. Even with all of this happening so far at this point into Richard's life, all of these elements that would in no doubt form a desire in him, he still would have one more major thing happen to him that would almost look like the last training to becoming a serial killer. With Richard in his late teens now, he would move in with his older sister and her husband. This would be even worse for Richard, for it would expand on his desires in a very bad way. Now that Richard was living in the same house with his sister and her husband, the man that Richard's sister was married to was known to be a peeping Tom. He would take Richard with him around the neighborhoods at dark, sneaking around, looking in windows, and learning how to sneak in and out of neighborhoods. And also, fresh out of the sane asylum, his cousin Mike would join up with them as well. At this point, Richard has almost been groomed, made into something terrible. What started as a young, innocent child is now in his late teens. He has seen very graphic images, even by today's standards, and the story would only get worse. The next big thing that would happen to Richard, he would receive a job at a hotel. This is where things would rapidly unfold for Richard, and his impulse would come out. Richard would start stealing things, and even earn the nicknames Ricky the Thief and Fingers. This will be the first time we also hear about Richard committing acts of assault on women and children. The first 2 occasions that would take place were on an elevator in the hotel, where Richard would be caught misbehaving with 2 children. He would be reported for the act, but nothing more would come of it. The last and final straw at the hotel, when Richard would see a woman when he would burst into her hotel room and try to assault her. But lucky for the woman, her husband would burst in and beat up Richard. And for some reason, criminal charges were eventually dropped, more than likely due to the couple living out of state. And at this time too, Richard would start taking acid and becoming more and more distant from his family and friends. At this point in Richard's life, when bringing everything to an end that would start to a beginning, with Richard now reaching the age of 22, he would leave Texas for once and for all and move to Los Angeles, California in 1982. Now that Richard is by himself in California, he will make friends and start his life there with no one watching him, and all alone with his thoughts and fantasies, an impulse beating at the door to get out. Elements in Richard's life will start to progress. Now living in California, he would start to use cocaine on a daily basis. He would also start stealing from stores and committing burglaries to make fast money to support his drug habit. It's known that Richard would travel California quite a bit, going from Los Angeles to San Francisco, before the murders and during the murders. People that Richard would become friends with in California were people like him that were on drugs, stealing, and living very shady lifestyles. By 1984, his impulse has taken all it can take at this point, and eventually, he will react on it fully. The boy that would be born an innocent child would be formed and molded into a killer over time. Richard would become the man that the world would call the Night Stalker, sneaking into people's homes at night while they were asleep, lying in their beds, unaware that there was a man in their home about to do unspeakable things to them. It's a terrible feeling to be lying in your bed, wondering, is tonight the night that someone will break into my home around 2 or 3 in the morning when I'm asleep and no longer can keep my eyes awake? All of California would be on the hunt for a man that they would have a very rough sketch of. But unbeknownst to the police, they have had this man in their grasp many times before. This is the story of Richard that would become Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, born innocent, but died one of the world's most evil serial killers to date. Thank you so much for your time. Please subscribe to the channel to keep up with stories we talk about. But friends, until we talk next time, remember, lock your doors at night.